Hello, and welcome to this edition of Spirit Podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. I'm Dr. Luke, quantum chiropractor, and this is Dr. Michael, naturopath extraordinaire. We love to integrate best practices of modern medicine with ancient remedies and modalities. In this podcast, we'll explore contemporary health and wellness topics with a blend of wisdom, humor, practical tips for the everyday person. If you want to learn more about our stories and our businesses, how to connect with us, etc., please click on the video link below. Let's get into it. Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the topic of miracles and especially miracles in medicine. Let's jump right in. Kick us off.
So yeah, I guess the first step that I would want to know in talking about miracles is what would really, be considered a miracle.
Yeah. How
That's
would
the
you
big
define
question.
that?
I think for me, I consider everything to be a miracle
Okay.
in reality.
Sure.
Just when you really look at like life in general, it's a miracle that we
Yes.
exist. There's so many different things that had to happen,
Right.
right, perfectly to create who we are in this moment at this time. And I think that in itself just tells us every waking experience and moment throughout reality is
So
a
life
miracle.
life itself is a
Yeah.
miracle, and every moment of
Hmm.
life then is an expression of that miracle. All right, that's a great definition. What if, let's just say, people in the public say, oh my gosh, a miracle happened. This place, this event, this thing happened. What does that, what would you think about that? What qualifies as something that's a miracle or miraculous,
Even in my description of how everything's a miracle,
right?
it's recognizing the uniqueness of it, maybe, and something that
Right.
separates out from what we might consider the norm
Okay.
and in a certain set of circumstances. So to me, I think when people are saying, wow, this is a miracle, it's because an unexpected thing
Right.
occurred that people are almost surprised by. They would think something else would have happened.
Right.
And the miracle is that it didn't, that this other great thing happened when they were
Right.
expecting the worst
Okay, so
somewhat.
something positive, right?
Mhm.
Not negative.
Yep. I
Otherwise,
like
it's a
that.
disaster, right? The Hindenburg
Yeah.
blows up. That's not a miracle. That we wouldn't classify it that way. But so something positive and extraordinary happens that wasn't expected, and usually pretty rapidly. Then what we would expect for time kind of shrinks. It's, oh, this person couldn't walk and now they can. Like that happens almost in an instant. And we would say, oh my gosh, that's a miracle.
Hmm.
Yeah. So those are some of the ingredients then, right? We get like a positive, unexpected outcome that, and sometimes we can't explain why it happened. And it might be a rare thing too.
Yeah.
So if everyone did it, we wouldn't call it a miracle.
Right. We wouldn't we
We use,
probably wouldn't recognize it
right.
conventionally as a miracle.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It still is a miracle if we look at it that way, but we might not use it, that language around it
right.
as we talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah, as I was pondering this topic too, like I was thinking, what are some ingredients that go into this that make something a miracle or that set the stage for the miracle to occur? And I came up with some things, and these are all just aspects, and there might be different combinations of these that show up. I think one of, especially if we're talking about in medicine, right, which is usually going to be something related to the body.
Yeah.
Of course, there can be miracles in nature, etc. We're in this podcast, it all applies, but we're narrowing it down more to the human body and someone who's unwell, and now all of a sudden they're well. I
Hmm.
think that's where we're touching here. The first thing is I would say, yeah, they're unwell, and that's like everyone agrees this person's unwell. I think then also the person is typically seeking help.
Yeah.
I can't change this on my own. I can't walk, for example. I'm in a wheelchair and I'm going to different people, different helpers. I need help. And so this person is seeking help. The next one is, I think, is readiness. The
Hmm.
individual is saying, I've had this thing for so long and I'm ready for, I can't stay where I am anymore. I'm ready for a change. I can't stay here anymore. Something
Hmm.
must change. So that I think the level of readiness is a pretty important ingredient. If someone's been newly diagnosed, or doesn't mean a miracle couldn't happen, but I think the level of readiness, the higher the level of readiness, the more easily the miracle can be introduced. That
So
I make
so
that
let's
suggestion.
let's clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
So by readiness, you're saying that they're willing to accept that it can happen? Like they're ready to receive
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
some okay.
receiving is a good
Yeah,
way of saying it.
cool. I like that.
Because we all know of, especially if you're a medical practitioner, there are some patients that will come for help, right? They're coming for help, but some patients are really identified with their condition
Hmm.
and they want you to help them, but they're not really there for you to cure them. That sounds counterintuitive, but I've seen some folks that are like that condition is part of their identity and they might want it to improve or be better, but they're not really there for a miracle.
Right.
And I'm not saying they would resist the miracle, but they, in a way, they are.
Yeah.
There's a level of resistance to a big positive change happening. Okay, so that's awesome. I think another piece of this is forgiveness. So oftentimes we know that in not being well, when we're unwell, there's stressors involved. Stress is part of a lot of medical conditions,
Hmm.
and there's emotional baggage that also gets tied in with that. And so oftentimes forgiveness, now that might just be as simple as I'm forgiving myself for this, but they're ready for that state of grace. They're ready for that state of forgiving other and forgiving self. Maybe they're angry at God, whatever translation of that they have. But I think being in that state of forgiveness opens that whole door for the miracle to occur. And I'm not bringing this up as a religious aspect. We're talking about this more in general. Of course, there can be religious aspects to this because spirituality is tied in with mind, body, soul. We say that a lot. These things are interconnected.
Yeah,
And so, if we're going to have a miracle, really all three of those planes are going to have a change.
I agree. There's a beautiful quote that I love by Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, and he says, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds upon the hill that has crushed it." It's one of my favorite. That imagery to me is that's what forgiveness
That is awesome.
represents.
I need to save that one for the next time I've crossed my wife and I want to restore the relationship. That would be, I need to write that one down. That'd be beautiful to put on the card with the flowers. Please forgive me. I like that. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word love. I think love is like, that's the key ingredient for the miracle. It's love.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. You have to, I think that's the core of forgiveness too. It's the core of being ready. It's the core of accepting help. Love is central to all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes with a miracle, there is a either direct or indirect connection with a higher power. Now, again, that could be a person's framework of God or the field, for example, the universe. There's different ways that we might express that, but having that recognition that there's something bigger than me that is part of this process. So it's that going from me being alone and separate to I'm connected to this bigger thing or
Yeah.
this bigger higher power. So however you want to define that. We're not here to split hairs on people's religious beliefs. I'm just simply saying that I often find that with a miracle, that's an ingredient.
I think there's something beautiful about accepting that there's something greater than yourself. And whatever that represents
Yes.
to to whatever religious system or belief that a person has, whether that be God, whether that be something just bigger than themselves, like
Right.
some universe. There's a lot of different thoughts out there. But I would say that's a real core piece of things, like recognizing something greater than yourself. Because in a miracle, how can something miraculous happen if if you don't see yourself as being really much of anything,
Right.
and you don't recognize that there can be something greater that can provide a gift to you in that
Right.
way.
Here's another parallel term I want to use: atonement.
Hmm.
Now, atone, um, not talking about it in a religious sense, but if we break that down, at one.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I'm in having a lot of pain and having struggle with my health condition, I can feel alone and separated, and everything is collapsing. I'm pulling energy into myself because it's so scarce. My survival is at stake. Once I open up to connecting to energy that is outside of me, and I'm becoming one with the higher force, the whatever you want to call it, the field, all of us want to be somebody. Like, who do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be somebody. I might be like this or this. If we can reach that point where we move from somebody to nobody and then just become one,
Hmm.
then miraculous things happen.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that if you think of reality, right? And this is a correlation with that.
Okay.
If you think of reality in general, how we understand it is in terms of opposition, right? Breaking
Polarity.
and
Yeah.
cutting
Yeah.
things in half to explain them and understand them. We divide to understand. But that's what we're doing to understand when we step back and we recognize that everything at its core is very much interconnected as part of one, right? Reality, one energy, one
Right.
field. I think that when you recognize that's a creative force, which is everything that's growing and living and going from breakdown to build up, right? That allows you to access that miracle that you're seeking. So that I think that oneness is very important. So again, I've
It's a
agreed
big
with
deal.
every
All
single
right.
one
All
you
right.
brought up here. I think
Okay. How about this one? This is going to throw you.
all right.
I called it beginnings and endings.
Hmm.
Beginnings and endings. So, like a lot of times, if we're taking a case history with the patient, when did this start? Oh, it started 3 years ago when this happened. Okay, there's a beginning to it. Where's the ending? I'm in pain. It feels like it's never going to end. A miracle is one of the ways that I think about miracles is that we take time as a variable in our healing equation and we shift it down to zero. So let me explain that. So
Hmm.
let's say that I cut my finger, small cut. Will my finger heal itself? Yeah, it after a certain amount of time, and we could look at some research and some data. Okay, a cut like this might take 7 days to heal. What if instead of taking 7 days to just heal naturally on its own, going through the normal progression of the healing process, what if it just happened like that? Then we say, oh, that's a miracle. There was a cut and now there's no cut.
That's true. Yeah,
Now, but did the same thing happen that was going to happen a week over the
that's
course
true.
of the week?
Yeah, it did.
It did.
And that's
Now,
a miracle.
that's a miracle. Now, this is just the body going along its normal trajectory, and I'm taking time and shrinking it down to zero.
Hmm.
It's zero. It's just happening like this. It's like we're taking, if we talk quantum now, we're taking that, like Einstein talks about gravity, for example. You're bending the outer points, they're meeting together. That's the way I'm thinking of this. Now, that's just the normal arc of healing. But as we talk about time, and now we might talk about some outside force that's coming in, there can be an intervention of outside energy that's coming into the body that's also part of this miracle. So those I would give distinction to that. But it is changing the story of the beginnings and the endings that go with that situation. It's like the whole story is now disrupted in a magical way, almost.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
You like that?
Yeah.
All right. And then I think we've mentioned a little bit like transcendence. I think that we're starting to get more and more into research on how, as we, for example, meditate more and start to move into higher and higher realms of awakening and transcendence, we're opening ourselves up to more options, more availability for change, more availability for miracles or things to rapidly change.
So change is, I think, the core piece
Absolutely.
there. And I would say when you're talking about shifting through different, transcending different levels or changing, transcending in an upward way, I guess that's how I would
Yes. Yes.
picture that, an
Okay.
upward change. I used to listen to a lot of Wayne Dyer,
Okay. Yeah, he's
and
awesome.
I should listen to him more. But one of the ways he described that is he said, listen, everything in our reality exists as a wave, like a frequency. And there's truth to that.
Sure.
And so it's an energy that exists as a wave. And for example, best way to think of it is if you think of the energy of a rock
Yes.
is very slow moving
Yes.
molecular movement. And then as you go to a gas, like you have very rapid molecular movement,
Correct.
it goes to the other side of the room very quickly. So that wave, that frequency shifts to a higher frequency, right? And so to me, transcending is shifting one's energetic being, their physical being, all of it's interconnected to a higher frequency. And he used to talk about, you know what
Absolutely.
foods are lower frequencies.
Right.
Like you should be eating
Exactly.
things that are healthy for you and resonate at a higher frequency. And as you shift to that, you're going to move yourself up.
Absolutely. And there's an energetic tipping point
Mm.
that will be what we might call transformation. That's the place. It's the melting point, the boiling point. Those are like those tipping points in matter and energy when they're changing states. That's where the miracle lies, at those tipping points. So I totally agree with what you're saying as the energetic level. If we add more and more energy, if we have some intelligence around that, it will reorganize to something of a higher order. And so that's part of this equation too with the miracles. The last little piece, this is maybe more minor, but I wrote down service. What's the point of this miracle? If someone has this horrible thing happen, this trauma, and it limits their life, but then they have a miracle and that gets flipped into a gift, how are you going to share that gift? Because that gift is, yes, it's for you, but it's bigger than you.
Right.
It's for others. There's going to be a powerful story there to share with other people and help them along their journey too. Those would be, that's maybe a long-winded definition or a list of some of the ingredients that I would speculate go into a miracle. Maybe the audience, those that are paying attention here, maybe you have some other ideas too, and you want to leave us some comments of
Yeah,
some
definitely
additional
do.
thoughts that you have
Yeah.
on this. This is a big topic, and the two of us don't have all the answers. We would have a lot of things in our life would be different if we had more answers.
Mhm.
But this is from our experience and from our own quest of miraculous things. And I know I have miracles that happen in my practice. I know you do too. And so why don't we like jump into some of those stories, because stories, as we share them, and of course we're going to change the names and those kinds of things, but as we share these stories with individuals, there might be someone listening to this that it just resonates with them and it sparks a change in them that helps them on their healing journey.
Yeah, and I'll mention this too, like when one shifts to a higher energetic state, and this is just a kind of esoteric
Yeah,
thing I
yeah,
felt like
sure.
I wanted
Jump
to
in.
share. That is, they are resonating at a higher level. They have an energy about them, and others can feel that. And they can actually partake of that for the miracles they're seeking. And that's what I think the service side of it is, it propagates itself forward. When even on the a lower level, let's say you're, I'm not trying to say this is a low thing, but let's say you pay it forward, right?
Right,
You order your coffee from Starbucks and you buy the person behind you a coffee, right?
right,
And then it just keeps happening, right?
right.
People, the next person goes, okay, I'm going to buy the next person. And oftentimes that chain just continues on. And I think it's important to recognize that miracles propagate miracles. And until they become a norm, and then they're not magical anymore, they're
Right.
just expected. And I
Exactly.
think that's a beautiful thing to consider
It
too, and the
is.
power of service in that what you're describing there.
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
All right, let's throw out some stories.
All right.
You got one for us?
The one that comes to mind, I like to just share a simple one. I have so many stories, and I could literally spend our entire time just bringing story up after
Yes.
story up. But the one that came to my mind for some reason when I was thinking of what I was going to share today, I this was my first year in practice
Okay.
and first year resident, and I'm learning like what to do and how to do things. And I had done quite a bit of physical medicine work at the time,
Okay.
and I had learned a very unique that not a lot of practitioners utilize adjustment of the shoulder.
Okay.
And so I was meeting with this couple comes in, and this gentleman had been suffering from
Mm,
pain in his right shoulder
okay.
for
Wow.
years.
Wow.
And he said, "Look, I'm just looking for something. I hear you guys do injections, you do these
Right.
things like we talked about options." And I told him, I said, "Look, I'm feeling your shoulder." And I'm being very straightforward with you. I had him do this little movement here,
Okay.
and he couldn't move it very far without it hurting really bad. And I felt the ball of his shoulder like in the front, so that, and I could feel like that area, that joint was forward more, it was more interior.
Okay.
Basically, I feel that and I go, all right, I think you would do well with this movement.
Okay.
And so I was like, let's do this and see how you respond with it and put on this salve to help with the
Right.
inflammation and the
Right.
pain. And I was like, and come back and do it again like in a week, and we'll see if that's the most conservative thing I could think to do for you,
Okay.
if it helps, because he had never been adjusted before.
Okay.
And so I did this adjustment for him, and he like was like, wow, it feels so much better, I feel great. And I'm thinking oftentimes like that's people feel good and they leave, and then I got to do it again later, and that's just been my
Right.
experience over time. And so long story short is I don't see him again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what happened with this guy? And 3 weeks later, his spouse who came in with them just came in to see me because she had made an appointment. And I was like, hey, how's this guy doing? And she goes, oh, he's great. He's feeling better than he's ever felt. And
Right.
then before I left, I'd met with her again, and it was the same thing. So he needed
One, just
one
one
thing.
thing.
And so to me, that was a miracle. It stood out as wow, that I could do this one movement for
Yes.
someone who had shoulder pain. And this is not normal, by the way. So at least my
Right.
experience, it hasn't been. And he was better. He never needed another anything again. So that was a cool
And
experience I had.
isn't it, don't you find it the case that if someone has this miraculous shift, maybe the first time they come see you, they
Mhm.
don't come back?
They don't come back.
And when I was first beginning in practice, like that I was a little disappointed by that. I'm like, they should be coming back for more. That's just my own ego. But now I'm like, no, that's awesome. If they only need to come in one time, that's like really awesome.
Yeah, I had a whole plan worked out. I was like, we're
Right.
gonna do,
Right.
TENS unit, we're gonna inject it
Yes.
with prolotherapy, we're gonna get the shoulder all tightened up, he's gonna feel great.
Okay.
And all I needed to do was a single
I'm
move.
going to
Oh, cool.
start out with kind of a simple one too.
All right.
Now, it's no less important, but I had a patient come to me, elderly woman, and she had been the primary caregiver for her spouse who had Alzheimer, and she was 24/7 on duty, on care with him for 7 years, never
Oh,
taking
wow.
any breaks. And whoa, that has a certain level of intensity that goes beyond words. So when she came in, I had her get on the table and I made just one contact, and so much heat and energy, vibration, shaking, tension was coming out of her body. And she was making sounds almost like you would make if you're having a really great massage
Hmm.
and you're getting towards the end and you're, oh, this is so amazing. It's like that. I make one touch next to her tailbone, and it's just opening up her nervous system and letting all of that come out that's been held in for 7 years. At the end of the treatment session, I said, okay, we're finished with the session for today. And she's, I don't want to get up. I said, then stay here. So she stayed on the table for 3 hours, and I'd walk by and keep working on her a little bit at a time. And the transformation was so phenomenal that I would absolutely call it miraculous. And when she finally got up off the table, she used those same words herself. She said, that is the most miraculous thing that's ever happened to me in my life. My nervous system is completely different than it was before I walked in. Again, that's not a typical result.
No.
Normally, I'm used to seeing people and we shed it in layers because sometimes I'll say this to people like, how fast do you want things to change? The average person will say, oh, I want all of it to change right now. Basically, I want a miracle, right? Are you willing to have your entire life turned upside down?
Hmm.
Or would you rather we just work on it? We'll peel away a layer, you adapt. We'll peel another layer, you adapt. We'll peel another layer, you adapt. And we'll do it progressively so that you can, in essence, still be in charge of yourself and your own process. You're more engaged in it.
Hmm.
So we might say we want the miracle, but in reality, most people they're not ready to turn over the keys to the whole thing and do it all at once. So that readiness, right?
Yeah.
This woman was ready. And that was like a phenomenal shift. She's come back a couple of times, very much intermittently, but wow, that was one of the most intensive releases of bound energy that I've had in my years of practice.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I can think of another. So this is actually, I think, a great example and of miracle change.
Okay.
I had and correlates with what you were saying too
Okay.
here. So I had a patient who had a form of cancer, breast cancer. It had gone to a lymph node. And she came in and was like, hey, I want to do the least invasive thing that we can do. Let's consider options here. And I said, sure, let's do it. She was very worried. And she was like, okay, we're going to be watching this very carefully. I said, don't worry, we're going to be running your cancer antigens
Mm,
much closer than we normally do. We're going to
okay.
look at that time, we were using circulating tumor cells. We didn't have ctDNA. And so basically, what was happening is she kept getting worse.
Oh boy. Okay.
Everything we were doing,
Right.
like it just kept worsening. And she got just more and more anxious. She was anxious from the beginning, like super anxious. And there just came this point where she had gone through all of this therapy. Everything just kept looking like the antigens kept going up and the imaging kept showing the same things and looking a little worse. And it was very,
Right.
and ultimately I said, listen, I had to talk to you about this issue. You are so anxious and so worried about what's going to happen that I think that you are creating in your reality the very thing that you're worried about. And because that's all you're thinking about
The
is this
belief.
cancer.
Yeah.
Is it going to get worse? Is it getting worse? Oh my gosh, I'm going to die from this. And listen, I don't want to discount the fear that goes along with that severe diagnosis, like to have a cancer diagnosis
Right.
and the anxiety and those things that go with it. But they don't help make things better. You have to work through those and you have to release that. So I referred her. I'm not the person to do that kind of work. And so I referred her to someone else and she did the work. And the next time she came back, she was like, you know what? I had this great experience. I am in a much better place. I'm not worried. I'm just letting it go. Giving it to God, is how she said it. And she had reconnected to her religious roots.
Okay. So her belief system got in part of the
It
equation,
did,
a big part of the
big
equation.
part of it.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is we did this. She had gone through additional therapies. But we had been doing basically the same thing throughout. And long story short is her antigen started going down.
Mm,
And it's been, I think, going on 3 years now
okay.
in remission
Okay.
and no recurrence. She did not lose her breast. She
Okay.
did not have to go through really significant therapy or
Yes.
treatment. She had to do some conventional stuff, but she did a lot of the natural therapies. But ultimately, generally speaking, she got better. And the only thing that really changed was how she perceived things. And that was a miracle to me. It was beautiful because you saw someone getting worse, they shifted their energy to a more positive state, and then she got better. And I think that's a beautiful miracle
That's
when we can do
awesome.
that. The expectation
Right.
changed, the readiness changed. So,
So if someone goes to seek a healer or a spiritual person that is they think might help them heal, a medical person that might help them heal, they're coming into the equation with a belief that they might get a miracle, they might get a healing. So I
mhm,
think, yeah, engagement or activation of that belief system is important.
very.
Here's a story I'm going to tell you. Like, this is there's a time factor here, but it wasn't like in everything instantly in one visit. A couple years ago, I had a man, I would say he was maybe around 70 and successful in his life, but a lot of childhood trauma, and his life was just becoming unbearable. He just had so much anger, emotional energy, just angst from this terrible childhood, right? So this is emotional energy, but he also shared with me some physical abuse issues that had happened. So it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual too.
Mm.
But he moves he moves to the West Coast where my office is from the East Coast, and he sold his car, he sold a lot of things, and he said, I'm going to live here for 1 year and I'm going to work on my healing. And I was like, whoa, like that's like that going to Tibet a thing. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Just the act of doing like that's readiness, right?
Yeah.
And that's also what an intention.
Hmm.
I'm going to unplug my life and I'm going to go get this healing. Now, he wasn't coming to see me. He was coming to the community we live where there are a lot of healers. And as he was, now he has a bicycle only, right? So as he's riding his bicycle, he sees my sign. He pops in and talks to me, and I was drawn in. We need to do some work together. I'm like, all right, let's go. So we start this process, and so much came up. And at about 3 months, this is coming in twice a week. At the 3 month mark, he had this huge transformational healing from abuse from one of his parents. And then he said, there's more. So then another 3 months, the second parent. And when those moments happen, they happen instantly, but it took peeling away those layers.
Yeah.
And then when you get to that tipping point, it's instant. But he was holding on to so much that it just had to come off a little bit at a time. And he would have days where he would leave my office and then he would tell me for 24 hours he was in such physical pain.
Hmm.
And then my statement always is, are you okay with that? And he'd be like, yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm going through the pain. I'm facing it. I'm doing it. And he would, and he did. And then 24 hours later, he's back again. He's okay. I feel good. I'm ready to go now. Let's do some more. So sometimes he would come in, he would feel better. I feel lighter. I feel less tension. Sometimes it's like I'm dragging him right back into the middle of not reliving it, but it's in the middle of that pain that's there. At that, he said there's still more. So he had already carved out a year. So really, he set his own timeline, right? 1 year. So as we were getting further in, trying to work on that third issue, that third family member from another generation, a grandparent generation, I suggested that he try some psilocybin. I sent him out to a practitioner that's legal in our state. He tried that once or twice, and he came back and said, I didn't like it. I don't want to do it. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, trust your body. Then a month or so later, he has another transformation. He shifts and breaks loose from that grandparent that gave abuse.
Hmm.
And then a couple of days later, as he's pondering it, he came back and said, that psilocybin, even though I only took it once or twice, it was like the part that the sticky tentacle finally, I was able to let it go. So crusty, hard, difficult stuff, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, so much stuff all wrapped up in this.
Hmm.
But he left as a new man, went back to the East Coast very quickly after. He was just a different person. Within a month, he's sending me messages. I'm in a brand new relationship. It's the best one I've ever had in my
Hmm.
life. I'm not angry. I'm just different. I'm better. And he was frequently sending me messages because we're very connected over this. But that is a huge transformation, a
Big time.
huge healing, big time. And it pulled those ingredients together: forgiveness, readiness, love, higher power, higher thoughts, suspending those illusions, beginnings and endings and changing the energy around those stories. It was just huge. And he became this transcended person that could now share love with others, where before, yeah, he was sharing grumpiness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I love about that story at its core, outside of all of the work he did, which he really put the work in,
Yes.
obviously,
Yeah.
he did it expecting to get better. He was
Right.
like, I'm coming here, I'm ready for this. And I think those higher thoughts, or what you just mentioned, are a very important aspect of that healing process, the achievement of a miracle. There's something that's coming to my mind, a poem that I remembered years ago. I memorized it. It was called Thoughts Are Things. You
Okay.
familiar with that one?
Yes. I've heard it.
Yeah, I love that poem. It says, I hold it true that thoughts are things. They're endowed with bodies and breaths and wings. And that which we call our secret thought speeds forth to the earth's remotest spot and leaves its blessings or its woes like tracks behind it as it goes.
Mm.
Thoughts are another name for fate. Choose
Mm.
then thy destiny and wait, for love brings love and hate brings hate. I think that's a beautiful
Oh,
way
it
to
is.
express thoughts are things.
You're such a poet. I love that. I love that aspect of you. Do you have another one? I've got too many that to even share during the podcast, and I started with some
Well,
simple ones. I want to get into some bigger ones.
yeah, you know what I'm thinking? I have a lot. And the truth is, we could spend the whole time
Yes.
here, and I don't want to keep the people here forever. So I actually would like you to share
All right. I'll
your
share one
emotional.
more quick
Yeah,
one,
great.
and then maybe we'll do a part two of this.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right, this one to me was pretty interesting. A man came to me, and he maybe in the 60s, very successful man, but he had been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer,
Mm,
and he was definitely going to follow the regimen of medical care from his doctor, but he also wanted to just supplement it with one or two other alternative medicines to just broaden the treatment plan, which is actually an awesome philosophy. On the third session that I did with him, I had my hands on him when he's in a very open, relaxed state. His nervous system is open, releasing energy. In my intuition, then it turned on, and I was seeing him as a child, like around age 6. And there was some things going on with his mother. And the story of it became that his mother died and in the hospital when he was 6. And the father, his father held his hand and was taking him to see the mother. And what the father was saying, son, don't cry, hold it in because your mother needs to see us being strong for her.
mm,
And so he held it in energetically. He's clenching, holding everything in, keeping that stiff upper lip, not showing any emotion as his
mm.
mother was dying and passed away. So now, all these years later, now he has colon cancer. During the session, then, I'm setting intentions for.
Did his mom pass with cancer? Do you know the
I'm
reason?
not, I don't recall that detail of the
Okay.
story. It's
Mhm.
likely that she did, but it's been several years and I don't remember the details of that. But the process, the session, then at the end, we were able to talk about this a little bit and it brought tears to him. But during the session, I could actually, as my hands were on him, I could feel the cancer shrinking. Like that sounds weird because I don't have my hands in a place where I'm touching his cancer, but I could just feel that intuitively, energetically, that cancer shrinking as he's letting go, as he's giving forgiveness to himself and to, I guess, his father for instructing him to hold his emotions in, as he was binding all that grief in that spot such a little boy, and he let go of that. And he felt super relaxed when he got up. He could tell something shifted, but he couldn't articulate anything. The next week, he went in to get a surgery done. He was scheduled for surgery, and the doctors were afraid, stage 3, that it was coming through the wall of the intestine. It was going to now spread, and they want to go in and do surgery. They got in there and they said, what's going on? It's not coming through the wall of the intestine anymore. It's inside the intestine. What? So then they treated, that was a much easier procedure to just clip it out. So in 1 week's time, he went from he's about to spread cancer throughout his body to now it's easily treatable. That's a crazy story, isn't it?
That's an
That's a
awesome
miracle.
story. That's a great story. And I got to say this because I'm feeling like it's an important thing to say. I just need to express, and I think this is important for you as well. I'm just going to speak for you,
Okay,
for all
please
of us.
do.
So we are apologizing to all of the patients that we have seen and had miracles. We will do more of these, and we will share your story hopefully as we go over the years, because I know sometimes people are watching, like there might be a patient of mine, and they're
Right.
like, why is he not sharing my story?
Time is so
I've had so many
limited.
good
I've
things.
got a stack of
So
things here
send
to
me, you
share.
know what,
Right.
if you want me to share something about you, send me an email. If you contact me, let me know.
Yeah. And even if you're not our patient and you've had a miracle,
Yeah,
please share it.
yeah,
We would love
yeah.
to do a follow-up about that too.
Yeah, and share, maybe even bring their practitioner on and talk to
Oh
them in
gosh,
the
that would be
future, and we
amazing,
can like
wouldn't it?
connect it. Yeah, it'd be really
Yeah.
cool.
So I expect miracles. I expect them. Now they're not going to be every day, every patient, but I expect them, and I set that intention. There's going to be healing. It's just a matter of how much.
100%. Yeah, I see it all the time.
All
So
right.
miracles happen.
Miracles in medicine. I love this topic. It energizes me just talking about it. I've got lots more stories that we could share. Thank you if you listened all the way to the end and didn't get bored too quickly. We'll probably do a part 2 to this. And thanks so much. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Yeah, for sure.
Take care. Bye-bye.